Hello, Terry Duncan here with Cut, Color, and Create. Welcome to my craft room. Today we're going to do another in our little series of how-to videos. This one I'm going to show you how to heat emboss. So let's talk about the supplies that we need. The first one is an embossing powder. I keep mine in a tub. I learned this from Jennifer McGuire on one of her videos, and it works perfectly. So I've got some gold embossing powder there. You need a Watermark ink. A lot of manufacturers make Watermark ink. VersaMark is my favorite. Then you're going to need an anti-static tool. There are a number of companies that make those as well. My two favorites are actually this Cottontail and the one from Tailored Expressions. Next, you need a stamp that you're going to heat emboss, or you don't necessarily have to have a stamp, but that's what we're going to use today. Then you need cardstock and a stamp positioning tool. And lastly, you need a heat tool. I love the Sizzix because it's got two different levels of heat that you can use. So let's get started. Before you place it in the stamp positioning tool, you want to add the anti-static powder to your card. So I'm going to take my Cottontail, I'm going to prime it, and then I'm going to brush that liberally over my cardstock. The reason you do this is to keep any stray powder from sticking to your cardstock and then ending up with powder melted where you don't want it. The next thing you do is you add it to your stamp positioning tool. You don't necessarily have to use a stamp positioning tool. I'm just not a very good stamper, so I always use one. And I'm going to put that in place. Then I'm going to take my stamp and I'm going to position it on the cardstock right where I want it to be. If it's a brand new stamp, you're going to want to condition it by either rubbing on it or using Watermark ink to prime the stamp. Mine is well used, so I'm just going to place it down here in the corner of my cardstock. But I'm going to just position it there, and then I'm going to pick up the stamp with my lid. Make sure it's stuck on there real good, and then I'm going to load up the stamp with my Watermark ink. So I'm going to liberally add it. And then I'm going to stamp the image. And I'm going to do that a couple more times just so that I get plenty of ink on my cardstock. And I'm starting to, I don't know if you can see or not, but I'm starting to see the ink show up on the cardstock, which means I'm getting a good impression. One last time. So I'm going to set aside the lid and I'm going to remove my cardstock from my stamp positioning tool. And then I'm going to bring in my embossing powder. And you can see I've got a little tray here that I use to scoop up the powder. I think it's actually a jewel tray, but it works perfectly for me. Some people use spoons. And I'm going to just sprinkle that powder over where I stamped the sentiment. Now, I find it helpful to just let it sit for a minute. Just let that embossing powder react to the ink and then pour it off gently. Tap the cardstock to make sure that you don't have any strays. I see I have a little bit there. So I have a special brush that I use just to remove extra pieces of embossing powder that don't want to leave. There we go. Now, the next step is very important. You want to make sure that your heat tool is good and hot before you start to melt the powder. So I count 40 seconds before I start applying the heat to the cardstock. So I'm going to do this real time so you see how long it takes. And before I do that, I see I've got a couple more strays that I want to get rid of. It does help to blow on your work to get little pieces of powder that are in places that are hard to get to. Okay, now I'm going to fire this up, heat it for 40 seconds, and then I'm going to move the heat tool over my powder until it's smooth and melted. Okay, now that that's good and hot, I'm going to start by heating the back side of the cardstock first. This helps to eliminate some warping with the heat tool. And then I'm going to bring it over to the front of my cardstock, moving the heat tool all the while, heating it till it's good and smooth, but not sucked into the cardstock. And that is how you heat emboss. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for joining me. Bye for now.